Content is intended to provide accurate information, however, is not intended as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult a financial, legal, or tax professional for specific information regarding your individual situation. Opinions expressed and provided are for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.
Welcome to Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntire. McIntire Retirement Services, Northwest Ohio's retirement planning resource.
And welcome into the program. This is your Game Plan for Retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for that common sense approach to our money, our finance, our investments, and our retirement planning. He is president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services. Chris McIntire, once again with us, providing that guidance and perspective on the financial world, trying to uncomplicate things a little bit, maybe tidy things up. And Chris, a little bit of our theme as we begin to turn to hopefully a little warmer weather and springtime in the air here. A lot of people cleaning out the houses, decluttering, maybe knocking some cobwebs down, looking at some yard work they may have in store for them in the coming months. But it's always good to do a little financial tidying up as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. When you get into those months, March and April around our neck of the woods here, you get, depending on what way the wind blows, it can feel like winter if it's coming off that cold Lake Erie, or if it's coming from the south, and it feels a little bit warmer. And, it's also that tax season time of thing. So I think financial awareness is probably more on people's minds than ever, especially in Ohio in the month of March. The weather, you just never know what you're going to get, and people want to get things done before it gets real nice. That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. So today we'll talk about some of these things that we can get done, do a little house cleaning in our financial lives, maybe make a little progress in tidying things up, consolidating, making things easier to track and keep tabs on, maybe identifying some opportunities, but lots of important information to come your way, ladies and gentlemen. So be sure to stay tuned. And as always, if you'd like to get a better handle on your finances, on your investment, on your plan for retirement, you are welcome to pick up the phone and give Chris McIntire a call. He does make his time available to us here on the program as our resource, but the most important part of the program makes his time available to you for a complimentary review and retirement planning strategy session. Just call 800-868-1194. That is 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. Chris, one of the foundational pieces to having a solid financial structure, and something that we can do a lot about, many of us, in a relatively quick amount of time. For many of us, this is kind of an easy step. Sometimes it can be more difficult, but if we have debts hanging out there, knocking those out, putting them in an order of operation, paying them off, and then turning the corner, that can be an area where we can make a lot of financial progress relatively quickly.
Yeah. And it's an area, if you've come into some debt, let's just say you got 4 different credit cards out there, for example, just as an example, and you put a little bit on each credit card every month to try to stem the tide, if you will. One could make an argument that it's better to concentrate on one, put all that money on one, concentrate on the next. Sometimes you can negotiate the interest rate if you've got some of that bad debt. Good debt might be, your mortgage on your house. And a lot of times we'll get a question on, hey, should I pay my house off in a lump sum right now? My mortgage, my interest rate might be 3%, but my investments have the potential to do better than 3%. So should I arbitrage and say, look, I'm going to keep my money here. I'll just make that monthly payment. I money invested in the portfolio. And, in some cases that makes a lot of sense. It kind of depends on the person's mentality, right? A lot of times if we're dealing with a generation of people that do not carry debt, they want things to be paid off. They wouldn't take a loan on a 0% loan on a car payment because they don't want a car payment, for example. And, I don't try to change their minds. I talk about, okay, well, here, if you do this, here's what you can do. And here's if you do this, here's what you can do, and try to explain it and let them kind of coach them through making a good quality decision, given all the parameters, Peter.
Now, we've been in a low interest rate environment, Chris, but there is, as you mentioned, some types of good debt and many types of bad debt. Properly managed debt can sometimes be a tool, but what we've got to really realize and understand is that more people probably lose financial progress as part of incurring debt than those that gain financial progress by taking it on. It's a matter of knowing and understanding how to use it, and in many cases, kind of just better to get out of it and stay away from it.
Debt has a lot of different types of issues to it. No question about it, Peter. And, I like, now that, I don't have any car payments as an example, and, boy, it'd be nice to get a new vehicle, but doggone, I don't want a payment and I don't want to, what the vehicles cost right now. So it's kind of nice not to have them. So once you clear that debt off, you have that relief of knowing I don't have it, and I can start saving more money. One of the other big ones we get, Peter, is, should parents or grandparents, for example, be helping pay off the student loan debts for their children and grandchildren, if you will. And hey, nothing wrong with that. If you've got some extra cash and you want to apply it to that student loan, that makes perfectly good sense to me, because some of these folks will say, well, look, they're going to inherit it when I pass away, but boy, I could help them retire some of that student loan debt right now. That's certainly a very valuable, thing to do for your grandkids.
I think that our best tool, though, Chris, for not only getting out of debt, but also building, accumulating, and managing wealth is understanding some basics in budgeting and cash flow. There's an equation there. There needs to be more coming in than is going out. And there comes a time in that transition period to retirement where budgeting and cash flow once again become paramount to our long-term financial success. It's an area that you help people focus in on, even if they have been lucky or blessed or hardworking enough to earn ample income, exceeding expenses during their working careers.
Income planning is certainly one of the biggest things that we do for folks in retirement planning, of course. How do we create and structure these income streams, in a very uncertain world, as you'll say, as we can all argue right here, inflation, geopolitical events, all these things that are going on. It seems like every month there's something else that we're having to deal with as a society, let's say, and, keep the politics out of it here, because everybody's got their opinions there, but, doesn't matter. We've had Republicans and Democrats in office, and good and bad things have happened under all of that. So sometimes you have to set some of that aside and realize, look, are we, like, for example, we kind of look at rebalancing some dividend stocks that we use for clients to get dividends. And get dividends is just profits that companies pay out if you own their shares of stock. So, we create some unique investment vehicles, or utilize unique investment vehicles to help create that income stream for folks. And, now we've got to deal with the inflation side like never before. My wife and I drove to Florida late in the month of January, returned, early in February, and there were some places down there where diesel fuel, which is, we drove our pickup truck, was $4.21 a gallon, and probably got a 33-gallon fuel tank on that diesel. So, you're dropping, $120 sometimes for fuel. And that's, that's huge. You have to think about that as you go into retirement. Like Peter says, look, we're budgeting cash flow. Is there more coming in than more going out? Inflation obviously then affects that outflow. How are you going to adjust your inflow?
Yeah, Chris, and I think that there is a lot of concern about inflation right now, rightfully so. I mean, a lot of retirement plans really do not include an appropriate level of inflation built into the plan, or even any inflation at all. But that is one thing that you really focus in on there at McIntire Retirement Services, helping people formulate that spending plan for retirement, that written retirement income plan. And I know that inflation, it is here, and that is something that you tend to encourage people to really examine and include in that written retirement income plan when you design it, structure it, and help them put it together.
Yeah. And we really enjoy doing that, kind of getting into the nuts and bolts. I'm a detail oriented individual there. So we call that diving down into the weeds, right? And we start our conversations up here at the 30,000 foot level and bring them down, because your average person who worked 30 years at a company, retired with a 401k, they're used to, well, I got a retirement lifestyle mutual fund, that was set. I chose it because I was retiring in 2020 or 2025, and that's what I've got, and as they work their way into retirement, we need to help them broaden that perspective on all the things that are available out there. What does good in a rising interest rate environment that it looks like we're heading into here? How do you combat that and then keep up with the purchasing power that inflation can certainly have an impact on your investments, and making sure that the dollars 5 years from now are going to buy the same goods that they can buy today. Look, and that's a challenge when you walk into a bank right now and your safe money is earning basically nothing, and the price of food is going up 7 to 8% a year. I mean, you're losing money in that regard, or losing purchasing power. Let's leave it at that.
The power of the dollar shrinking, as we have watched it, especially here over the last couple of years. But again, these are items that you need to include in your planning. And this is a great time of year sort of to regroup, gather everything together, examine it, and see what is helping you make forward financial progress, a little financial spring cleaning as we get into that time of year. Another area that Chris McIntire can help with, ladies and gentlemen, and making sure that you've got that plan put together and in writing. That is what they do at McIntire Retirement Services. If you'd like to take advantage, pick up the phone and give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. Chris, another thing that we think about this time of year certainly is taxes. Now, maybe we've got them done and filed. Maybe we're getting close at this point in time. But bottom line is that taxes really do force us in some aspects to at least do some elementary and basic financial organization. It really can be a great time if we take a little extra time to focus on getting things neat and clean and organized in our financial lives.
No question about it. And, kind of two different types of taxes most folks are going to deal with as they transition into retirement, or if they're already there. And most folks worry about income taxes, and they've been putting money into their 401ks and their IRAs. They retire. Now they have to take money out of them. So, it went from a tax reduction type of vehicle to, hey, it might be a tax increasing type of vehicle now that money's coming out of it. And, you have to control how you're going to take money out of it. Here we're at the beginning of the year. So, you and I have many different conversations as we get closer toward the end of the year, where we say, look, if you're going to need $80,000 to do something, and the only place you can take it from is your 401k, maybe you take 40,000 out in November or December and the other 40,000 out in January. You spread that big tax hit over 2 years. Maybe that saves you some dollars. So understanding that, the Roth conversion piece that you and I talk about, and I think in 2021, we did more Roth conversions than any other time in history. So thankfully, we're getting that message out. And takes a lot of time and effort to understand what tax bracket people are in. And as we've said many times on this program, in the year 2026, the Trump tax cuts would have expired, and if they don't get renewed, taxes are going to go up on basically every income tax bracket, especially that 12% tax bracket. That's going to go back to 15%. That's probably the big one for most of our listeners today.
But it means that today there is opportunity to do some proactive planning. And that is another area where Chris McIntire and McIntire Retirement Services really focus in time and attention is saving you money in taxes, making sure that you are preserving and keeping as much of your money as possible moving into the future. Not just a look at last year, but taxes remind us that we should be proactive for all the years to come. It's not what you make, it's what you keep after all. And being efficient on taxes can be as good as making higher rates of return, but typically comes with far less risk. So let's reduce that risk. Let's keep more of our money and let's pay attention to this as a part of the conversation about just getting that financial spring cleaning together and part of the planning process there at McIntire Retirement Services. Again, if you'd like to take advantage, pick up the phone, give them a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. Now, Chris, we hear a lot about diversification and the importance of diversification as we are looking at our assets and investments, but you mentioned that consolidation is also a great opportunity to get a better handle on our finances. Where do these two things fall in line with each other, and where might they actually conflict?
I would say the most common area where we help people in the consolidation side of things is, bringing those 401ks together. If you've worked at 3 or 4 different jobs, for example, and if it's a husband and wife, there's always typically a couple of pieces to the puzzle that are out there, and a lot of times it's the people in the medical fields that have worked at different hospitals or nurses that have, done many different stints in different places, and other places have merged together, and 401ks, 403bs get left behind, if you will. So, we help some, a listener who's probably listening to the show here. So I won't get into any of the gender pronouns, but a client, I think it was 8 or 9 different retirement plans that we brought together. Now it is not uncommon in retirement, Peter, to, have a couple of different retirement accounts. So if somebody walks into the office and they said, I've worked at Whirlpool, for example, for 40 years, and here's my 401k. And hey, it may make sense to say, okay, look, we're going to roll it into an IRA. We're going to have an investment piece. We're going to have an income piece, and we might have a safe money piece. And just to diversify it out a little bit. And, hey, they may want to have some of this money go to certain beneficiaries, some of the money go to other beneficiaries as well. So just to give a couple of different examples of where some of this comes into play. But as you get into retirement, you want to consolidate into a plan, and in what all that involves, certainly, could be on an individual basis, no question about it.
Now, whether you've got 1, 2, 3 different buckets, diversification within the accounts is not always directly linked to the number of accounts that you have. You can have great diversification within one account. Chris, if you've got 2 or 3 or 4 out there working simultaneously, sometimes you find that there's actually duplication and less diversification as a result.
Yeah, no question about it. If you've got a large cap mutual fund in a 401k and and an index fund in an IRA, for example, those are probably pretty close to the same thing, actually. So, understanding where you're not, you don't have a whole lot of carryover, if you will, and being truly diversified. It's one thing if you're 60% stocks, 40% bonds, for example, you can still diversify into like real estate, if you will, commodities, a number of different factors there. But, a lot of times folks will come in with 3 or 4 different types of accounts, and, they basically all look the same, and, they just haven't paid much attention to it. And coming up on retirement, they really need to, because, if a large cap mutual fund is going to lose 20%, an index fund's probably going to lose close to that as well. Or gain, I guess we could say too. Yeah.
Now that brings up a point that the market does move over time. Our needs change over time, and therefore regular rebalancing on an ongoing and periodic basis is another part of kind of this financial housekeeping that we need to do. Unfortunately, a step that is often overlooked.
Yeah, it certainly is overlooked. And, as we all like it when the markets are running strong and we want to hang in there for a little bit more, and then all of a sudden we get a month like January, which was a very volatile month, which is yeah, I guess sometimes you could say it's uncharacteristic of the month of January. It's normally a very good performing month from a historical perspective. And we all want to hang in there a little bit more instead of rebalancing and staying with our 60-40 or whatever your mix is based on your risk tolerance. And look, it's easy to get greedy when we're looking behind us at what the market did in the past to judge by what we think we're setting our expectations for what we might get in the future. And, as we all know, the market can disappoint and disappoint quickly. We did not have a technical correction in the markets overall in 2021, and it hit pretty quick there in the month of January. And February was obviously a seesaw. This Russia-Ukraine conflict certainly throwing a wrench into into things. And usually those events are short-lived as well. They're headline, they grab the headlines, of course. Anytime there's 150,000 Russians on your border, certainly gonna could jar your confidence, let's say that.
But previous types of incidents like that, I remember the Gulf War conflict, and going back in history, there's been no lack of kind of military interventions or incidents, and typically those downturns are very short-lived. But it is maybe an opportunity, Chris, to do some rebalancing within the account when we do see markets move and react to things.
Yeah, no question about that. And we have done quite a bit of rebalancing. We've gotten some phone calls and whatnot from some clients that have gotten a little bit nervous that we're taking some extra chances back in the day, and now think, all right, is it time we take some of the heat off? And we're big safe money folks, so we have a lot of clients that have safe money strategies, and sometimes you need to remind them, look, we did this so that we didn't have to overreact over here and lay it out that way. And sometimes they're watching the headlines like everybody else out there is. So that's a very fair comment to make, that look, we all get a little bit nervous when things happen. And I think when we talk about this Russia-Ukraine issue here, I'll kind of make a joke. It's like, the most corrupt government might be taken over by the second most corrupt government, right?
Well, again, we are talking with Chris McIntire. We're talking about tidying up your financial picture, doing a little financial spring cleaning. And he does offer the opportunity for a complimentary review, evaluation of your plan, your investments, your assets, and your outlook for retirement, putting that plan together in writing, looking at the risks that you are taking. Are you comfortable with those risks? Are you aware of the size of those risks, the amplitude of previous downturns, and the effect and impact that would have had on your current portfolio is something that you should be aware of and have an understanding of. The fees that you're paying, the taxes that you may be liable for into the future, these are all items that Chris can help you to better understand, formulate a plan around, concise, consolidated, streamlined plan for you to achieve your financial goals. If you would like to take advantage of that, pick up the phone and give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. Chris, and another house cleaning task is reviewing performance. We should be looking back at our performance, both in good times and in bad, and evaluating how we have done and maybe how we've measured up, possibly not to the market though, but to our own risk tolerance and comfort level. Sometimes that can be an interesting metric or means for comparison, correct?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so let's do something pretty basic here. So obviously it's easy for us to turn on the TV or log into Yahoo Finance, and we can see how the stock market is doing. Well, the Dow is up today. My portfolio was down. Okay. Well, the Dow is 30 stocks. Your portfolio might be 70% bonds. So you should be watching the bond market, not necessarily the stock market, because you're much more heavily weighted. So if the Dow, the S&P 500 went up 10% one year, and you were 60% allocated to stocks and 40% to bonds. Okay. Well, I suppose using that easy numbers, you'd say, well, 60% of my money then should have made 10%. right? Because that was in stocks. Okay. 40% of my money was in bonds. Okay. Well, bonds had a tough 2021. Bonds so far have had a difficult 2022, and they may be negative. So, I mean, that's where you're seeing some of this, I don't want to call it ripple effect, but, the inflationary environment, the threat of rising interest rates that, has an impact, because it's easy to say, well, the market did 20% and I made 9, it's like, but what was your correlation to the stock market, to the S&P 500, the 500 largest companies in the United States, versus a diversified portfolio where you'd have some international exposure, maybe some commodities like gold and oil within the portfolio, and some bonds and real estate, number of different aspects. So, you never turn on CNBC and they say, well, hey, today a diversified portfolio would have done this. They just looking at stocks because that's what they talk about all day is stocks. And I get that,
Interesting that is such a disconnect, though, that we pay attention to those news headlines, yet that is typically not what any of us on a daily basis would likely see reflected in our portfolio, Chris.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you're assuming no fees and all of those things that come out of that when you're looking at a pure index. You can't, invest in a pure index. You got to buy the companies within them, and some kick out dividends, some do not. So it can be discombobulated at best is a good way to tell folks that, because that's what they're used to seeing on the TV. That's where the information is coming from, is how stocks are doing and how did my portfolio compare to the stock market, even though very little of it was actually invested in the stock market in some cases.
We need to understand our portfolio and what we own in order to have a fair gauge for results. And that's another area where Chris McIntire helps to tidy things up, do a little financial house cleaning. And if you would like to take advantage of that opportunity for that complimentary review, that retirement planning strategy session, pick up the phone and give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. Chris, a lot of people have a collection of tools, assets that are out there. They have done some great work in saving and accumulating, but having that roadmap, an outline for identified goals and a plan ahead for how to achieve them is another area where many of us need to kind of circle the financial wagons and get a little bit of focus on having that actual plan that helps us to achieve and accomplish those goals.
Yes. And, seeing something in writing, making it much more visual. I think most of the people actually listening to the show today are actually more visual oriented when they intake information. Now, my dad loves to read. He can read a few books. He loves to listen to the radio. He probably has some of those skills to do both. But a lot of the folks, when we're looking at money and numbers and all that, they need to see it, not necessarily hear it. And Peter, how many times we go to conferences and, we're looking at stuff up on a screen and somebody's saying something, but we're actually interpreting more of what we see than what we hear, if you will. And, with software and things like that we have the capabilities to show folks in real time, make it changes to inflation, changes to taxes in real time while they're looking at it, certainly can help them, help their level of understanding is probably a good way to put it. And that, I like to think that's the niche that we have. I come from a long line of teachers, and that's probably a calling that I kind of transition into in the world. I do financial advisor, but we also do a lot of educational events, as you know, and a lot of those folks come in and see us eventually too.
Well, I think that concerned planners, savers, and investors, maybe now more than ever, are recognizing the benefits and the need for qualified, experienced guidance in putting that plan together. And Chris McIntire, the team at McIntire Retirement Services, they are there to provide that guidance where needed for Northwestern Ohio savers and investors, just like you do a spring cleaning around the house, tidying things up, that financial to-do list, tackling those tasks. is of the utmost importance. And Chris can help bring all of that together into a written plan to help you achieve your goals moving into your financial future. If you would like to take advantage of that complimentary review and that retirement planning strategy session, pick up the phone, give McIntire Retirement Services a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. As always, Chris, it has been a pleasure. We appreciate the time, the opportunity to share it with you. We look forward to talking with you again real soon here on Your Game Plan for Retirement.
Hal, my pleasure. Good to be with you again, Peter, and thanks for listening, everybody. Stay safe out there.
Visit McIntyreRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.
Any comments regarding safe and secure investments and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to securities or investment advisory products. Indexed or fixed annuities are not designed for short-term investments and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract.